The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the courtroom, casting long beams of light across the polished wooden floors. I sat in my usual spot in the back row, a place I'd come to think of as my own over the years. I wasn't a lawyer or a journalist, just someone who found courtrooms fascinating. They're places where lives change, where truths are laid bare, and where justice, real justice, can sometimes be seen in its purest form. Today was one of those days, though it didn't start that way. The case had been the talk of the courthouse for weeks. Emily Carter, a wealthy socialite known for her lavish parties and sharp tongue, was being sued by her former housekeeper, Maria Gonzalez. Maria claimed she'd been underpaid, overworked, and then fired without warning. Emily, on the other hand, seemed to treat the whole thing as if it were beneath her. She arrived at the courtroom that morning, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people make in a year, her hair perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She walked in like she owned the place, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, her chin held high. Her lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit, trailed behind her, already looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Judge Marcus Williams entered next. He was a man who commanded respect without even trying. Tall, with a calm, steady presence, he had a way of making everyone in the room feel seen. He'd been a judge for over a decade, and his reputation for fairness was well known. But today, even he seemed to sense the tension in the air. He took his seat, adjusted his robe, and called the court to order. The proceedings started like any other case. Emily's lawyer argued that Maria's claims were exaggerated, that she was just trying to take advantage of his client's wealth. But when Maria took the stand, everything changed. She was a small woman, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the witness box. Her voice was soft, but her words were powerful. She spoke about working 12-hour days, often without breaks, about how Emily would yell at her for the smallest mistakes, calling her names and making her feel worthless. She described the day Emily fired her, refusing to pay her for the last 2 months of work, leaving her with nothing to support her family. As Maria spoke, Emily sat at the defendant's table, her face twisted into a smirk. She rolled her eyes, whispered to her lawyer, and even laughed under her breath a few times. It was like she thought the whole thing was a performance put on for her entertainment. Judge Williams noticed. He gave her a warning, his voice calm but firm. "Miss Carter, this is a courtroom, not a theater. Please show some respect." Emily didn't take the warning seriously. When Maria finished her testimony, Emily leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Respect," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Please, you expect me to take this seriously? Look at you, sitting up there like you're some kind of king. It's almost cute." The room froze. I could feel the collective gasp from everyone around me. Even the bailiff stopped mid-step, his eyes wide. Emily's lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear. Judge Williams, however, didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the overhead lights. Then Judge Williams leaned forward, his eyes locked on Emily. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice low and steady, "this courtroom is a place of justice, not a stage for your arrogance. You may think your wealth and status put you above the law, but let me remind you, they do not. The law applies to everyone equally, and today it will apply to you." Emily opened her mouth to respond, but Judge Williams raised his hand, silencing her before she could get a word out. "You laughed at me, at this court, and at the hard-working woman who trusted you to treat her fairly. But let me tell you something. Your money doesn't make you better than anyone in this room. In fact, it's your character that defines you. And from what I've seen today, yours is sorely lacking." The room was so quiet you could hear the faint rustle of papers. Emily's face turned bright red, her confidence crumbling under the weight of his words. She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight back, but for once, she was speechless. Judge Williams continued, his voice calm but filled with authority. "I've seen people like you before, people who think they can buy their way out of accountability. But justice isn't for sale. Today, you'll learn that lesson." He then ruled in favor of Maria, awarding her not only the unpaid wages, but also damages for emotional distress. As the gavel came down, Maria burst into tears, her hands covering her face as relief washed over her. Emily, on the other hand, looked like she'd been slapped. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, and stormed out of the courtroom, her lawyer scrambling after her. As I left the courthouse later that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Judge Williams's words echoed in my mind. They weren't just about Emily. They were a reminder that no matter who you are, humility and respect matter. And sometimes, it takes someone like Judge Williams to put people in their place, not with anger, but with quiet, unshakable dignity. That day, the courtroom wasn't just a place where justice was served, it was a place where a powerful lesson was learned. And I'll never forget it. The way Judge Williams handled the situation with such grace and authority left a lasting impression on everyone who was there. It was a reminder that true power doesn't come from wealth or status, but from integrity and respect for others. And in that moment, Judge Williams was the embodiment of both. As I walked away from the courthouse, the weight of the morning's events still heavy on my mind, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. Hope that, even in a world where money and power often seem to rule, there are still people like Judge Williams who stand up for what's right. People who remind us that justice isn't just a word, it's a promise. And that promise, no matter how often it's tested, is one worth fighting for. Hey everyone, if this story moved you, if it made you think, or if it reminded you why we need to keep having these conversations, please take a moment to like this video. It really helps spread awareness. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something like this? Let's talk about it. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're here to share real, powerful stories that need to be heard. Lastly, share this with your friends and family. The more people who see this, the more we can bring awareness and change. Thank you for watching and being part of this journey. Let's keep pushing forward, together.